Our country was destroyed from within, destroyed systematically. Obama out of hatred and the Biden administration out of impunity. I'll tell you who the United States Prosecutor's Office is already investigating. You'll be glad, maybe even surprised. The endless crimes of those who thought they were untouchable. Members of Biden's team are refusing to testify in court and in Congress one after another. I quote, "The right to refuse this is called self-incrimination, self-incrimination." Well, and as the cherry on top, the governor of California spent $17 billion to draft the budget for a high-speed rail from Los Angeles to San Francisco. Just to be clear, in China, 1 kilometer of such a railway costs about $20 to $25 million. In Japan, it's $25 to $30 million, and in California, calculating the budget and making the plan costs $26 million per kilometer. And the cost of building the railway is currently estimated at $153 million per kilometer. That is 6 times more expensive than in China and 5 times more expensive than in Japan. It's simply impossible to justify that in any way. To make it clear, out of the $153 billion, they plan to steal all $153 billion and then ask for more. This is the America of the Democrats. This is the America of Newsom, Schiff, Pelosi, Biden, Obama, the Clintons, the Clintons, the Clintons, and the Clintons. We don't want this kind of America. And at the end, there will be a new segment, by the way, The Last Nail. You will really enjoy it, ladies and gentlemen. Political parties are created to take power into their own hands and implement the policies set out in the party's platform. Sometimes openly, sometimes secretly. To gain power in countries where there is a so-called democratic electoral system, you need to get more than half of the seats in the main legislative body of the country, which is usually called the parliament. The American parliament has 2 chambers. One is the Senate and the other is the House of Representatives. Accordingly, there are 435 members. 51 senators allow you to control the Senate, and 218 representatives allow you to control the lower house of Congress. The popularity of the party is constantly checked by public opinion polls. For example, as of July 15, 2005, the polls showed that in the following year, 2006, the Democratic Party would get 7 more seats in Congress than on the day of the poll in 2017. For comparison, the Democratic Party, according to public opinion polls, would get 33 more seats. This was during Trump's first term. Trump was elected, people got scared, and they started saying that maybe he's not right for us, maybe he'll ruin everything. To hell with her. So the Democrats, let's put it this way, started this propaganda, and according to predictions, they were supposed to get 33 more seats. So what did the polls and analyses show? On July 15th, 2025, here's what will happen. Our elections are in November 2026, right? So what will happen in the elections? The Democrats worked hard to increase voters' concerns about Trump's reforms. This is how they accomplished it in his initial term, and they were largely successful. At that moment, the advantage was in the psychology of the people. The advantage was there. We need to get Democrats in office quickly, as Trump will cause significant issues. So what did they end up with now?
What happens if you look at race after race? It's the same idea. So the seat ratings in the House of Representatives under a Republican president, like in 2005 and 2017, there are more chances for a net gain of seats. But look at what happened last time. The Democrats were ahead by 33 seats. And in 2005, the Democrats were ahead by 7 seats. And what's happening now? Actually, right now, the Republicans are ahead. In fact, the Republicans have a better chance of gaining a net plus 12, according to the data, if you take into account the likely, leaning, and undecided districts. Democrats are not only behind their 2017 and 2005 overall ballot pace. In fact, if you look at each district, you can see that, at least for now, the Republicans really have more opportunities for a net gain in seats. This is nothing like the wave elections of 2006 or 2008.
Despite the stream of lies coming from the mainstream television channels, people can see that life is getting better under Trump and the Republicans.
Holy MAGA. The Democrats had problems in 2017 during Trump's first term. The Democrats had plus 33 at this stage. Now the Republicans have plus 12. And that's despite the Democrats' protest. No to Kings, which was supposed to show that the majority of the country is firmly against Donald Trump. This is after all the cuts, doggy. That's the public mood, even considering everything the Democrats tried to do, hoping that at least something would work. It seems that spending a whole month fighting to bring Mara Salvatrucha, 13 gang member, back to the United States turned out to be not as popular as you thought. And it turns out your 6 hours on the Capitol steps, or the 24-hour filibuster, or 8 hours of delaying the big, beautiful bill, such theatrical speeches don't unite Americans around your idea. The Democratic Party is failing because they still refuse to learn from the lessons of their defeat in 2024. They are out of touch with reality. They need to connect with the American people. Everything they do is for the headlines, for popularity on social media, for likes and clicks. And so they see ovations and applause from their radical, always online part of the electorate, which craves chaos, destruction, and opposition to Trump. But outside of this small minority, the Steel Americans, even those who don't like Donald Trump, see the following. One party that acts extremely productively, and another party that behaves capriciously and ineffectively.
It seems that the Lord God got angry with the Democratic Party and took away their reason. In fact, the ideals promoted by the so-called progressives are things like sheep-like gender reassignment for children, fighting for criminal illegals, reducing the police, destruction, and disarming citizens despite the arming of criminals. This leads to the conclusion that anyone who supports the Democrats today is either very stupid, well, idiots as we would say, or they just don't care about law, order, reason, or common sense, and are ready to sacrifice. All of us, including, by the way, their own relatives, for the sake of, well, most of them do it for their careers, let's put it that way. In other words, those who support what is now called the Democratic Party, at the very least, they're democratic socialists, but really they're getting closer and closer to what we call, well, communo-fascists. Yes, those who support it today are either idiots or scoundrels. It's one or the other. By the way, I'm curious, ladies and gentlemen, do you agree with me or not? By the way, I don't see any third option. Well, okay, the third option is that he's both an idiot and a scoundrel, but I definitely don't see a fourth one. Listen, fool, or maybe, excuse me, bitch. Sorry, dog, I didn't mean to offend you.
Millions of people are protesting, both in small towns and big cities. Millions of people are protesting, both in small towns and big cities. Small protests and huge protests, defying fear, defying the reign of terror.
You're definitely exaggerating. You're talking about a reign of terror, when for Democrats or critics in the media, anxiety is at its peak. Honestly, it doesn't have any effect.
I want to respond to you. I was exaggerating when I talked about a reign of terror. No, that might be an exaggeration for you as a white man. For me as a Latin American, it's not an exaggeration. No, I'm not being racist.
Rejecting my opinion just because I'm a white man?
No, I'm not rejecting your opinion. I'm telling you how the Latin American community, the community of color in America, feels. All right, then let me speak for myself. You said I'm exaggerating. Let me respond. I'm not using white man as an insult.
When you mention that, you're dismissing my opinion.
To use white man as an insult.
When you mention that, what she just said, immediately comes to my mind. And it really makes you think about a lot of things that were said earlier and how it all connects to the current situation.
Did you see those two crazy Democrat women who, as soon as they don't like something, immediately start yelling that anyone who disagrees with them is a racist or a fascist? Do you think they're idiots, or are they careerists who are losing their last remaining trump cards? Or maybe they're both. By the way, it's interesting how racism against white people has become, in certain circles in the United States, something honorable and respectable. And these circles are the Democratic Party of the United States of America. They think that voters really like this, even though more than 60% of those voters are white. During Obama and Biden, the Democratic Party got out of control and decided that they are now above the law. Basically, they are the power, and they do and say whatever comes into their foolish heads. One of the most despicable members of the House of Representatives, Adam Schiff, he was a member of the House, but for lying, he became a senator from California. Here, they reward you when it's especially good. Even the Democrats themselves called him the #1 liar in the United States Congress, which is why he became a senator. Let me explain. If you indicate in the documents that an apartment or house is your primary residence, you get a loan on better terms. Because the bank believes it's taking less risk, so you're deceiving the bank so that it thinks it's taking less risk and charges you less money. What if you listed several houses in different states as your primary residence? That's fraud against a financial institution for personal gain, meaning to get better mortgage terms. And here in the United States, and I think in other countries too, that's a prosecutable offense. Remember, Trump was accused of that? It turned out that none of that was true, that he made fraudulent statements to get better loan terms from the bank. The New York prosecutor charged him. Letitia James, who herself at that time really, well, not like Trump, was deceiving banks. You couldn't make this up. Now she's being tried for that. Adam Schiff, so at the time he led the impeachment process against Trump, heading a group of members of the House of Representatives. It's interesting how the people who shout, "Catch the thief, catch the lawbreaker," turn out to be lawbreakers themselves. If they put Trump on trial, why not put Letitia and Schiff on trial too? Adam Schiff got a nice morning gift. His case was transferred to the prosecutor's office. And naturally, Donald Trump didn't miss the chance to react to this, I'm sure, pleasant event for him. I also believe that if they tried Trump for allegedly the same crime, then both of them should be tried as well, since they used their positions and deceived financial institutions. Knowing that Trump's story with Russia was fabricated, Schiff interfered with the United States president's ability to run the country. That means he interfered with our ability to live normally, to respond properly to the actions of other countries, and to react adequately to various economic problems. In other words, this is, of course, a betrayal of the interests of the United States. And constantly leaking information to the press makes him both a traitor and a scoundrel. I don't know if there are any idiots left in America who, knowing that Schiff deceived the bank, he doesn't deny it, by the way, still think he's innocent. And it's all a lie. It will dissipate like morning fog. But it's nice to hear that James Comey is the FBI. And John Brennan from the CIA are under investigation. I won't lie, it's nice. Yeah, that's it. Today, James Comey's daughter was fired from the Department of Justice, but not because she's his daughter.
We just learned that a federal prosecutor named Maureen Comey was fired from her job today. It just so happens that she is the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey. Yeah, it just so happens that she was the prosecutor in the case against Jeffrey Epstein. That's all we know. What do you think about that? I mean, he's saying that it's a Democratic hoax.
And let me be careful here, because you're right, there's a lot we don't know. I've talked to people who are in that office right now. All they know is that she was fired. And as you said, she's the daughter of Jim Comey, and she was the prosecutor in the Epstein case and the Ghislaine Maxwell case. I want to emphasize this word several times. If this is some kind of attempt to take a shot at Jim Comey, then it's an absolute act of cowardice. It's a low blow. It's absurd if this is the beginning of some attempt to make Maureen Comey a scapegoat. To say, well, she handled the Epstein and Maxwell cases and she messed everything up and she's the reason for all our problems.
This is just a farce.
This is nonsense. She handled these cases 4 years ago. What does this have to do with this whole hypocritical story about providing these documents? Now?
For some reason, the daughter of Comey was chosen by the Justice Department to prosecute Epstein-Maxwell and then to prosecute Sean Combs, also known as Diddy. Well, he's kind of an equivalent to Epstein. I told you about him, the one who connected underage girls with important people, provided drugs, and organized group sex. There were also video recordings of the brainwashed participants, not always with their permission. In fact, I would even say always without their permission. So Epstein was a friend of Bill Clinton, and Didi was a close friend of Barack Obama. And Kobe's daughter was chosen to accuse all these people. I wonder if her activities will be looked into. Investigated. Because from my point of view, there's a lot of interesting stuff to be found there. Wherever you look, wherever you dig, wherever you spit, during the Democratic Party's rule, there's rot, stench, deceit, and then a bit more deceit. This swamp needs to be drained, and as soon as possible. It doesn't really help the Democrats that several of Biden's aides involved in the mechanical signatures case are refusing to answer Congress's questions, citing their right against self-incrimination. We have the right under the Fifth Amendment, as it's called, let's say, if we translate it from English in the United States. You can say in court, on the advice of my lawyer, I will not answer any questions. And officially, this is not considered an admission of guilt or an aggravating circumstance.
A top aide to former First Lady Jill Biden invoked the Fifth Amendment, refusing to answer any questions regarding the health and cognitive state of former President Joe Biden. During his time at the White House, Anthony Bernal, who was Jill Biden's chief of staff, was questioned. Is President Biden capable of performing the duties of the president? And has President Biden ever instructed you to lie about his health? And he didn't want to answer. And Adam. This comes just a few days after former presidential Dr. Kevin O'Connor also invoked the Fifth Amendment. He decided not to answer questions about Biden's health or his cognitive abilities while he was in the White House. Are you surprised?
But no, listen, I think it turned out even worse than many of us expected when Biden was president. You have some pretty high-ranking people who don't want to say anything at all. Maybe they just have contempt for the process, but I think more likely they just don't want to lie, so they just stay silent. They are exercising their right to remain silent in the United States. But yes, the second-hand issue is simply astonishing. Recently, there was an interview with Biden, and he hardly helped the situation, basically saying, yes, I just verbally approved some list that other people put together. After all, this is one of the United States president's most remarkable powers. To, pardon people, and he really didn't pay proper attention to it. And this, raises questions about how involved he actually was in what was happening in the United States government. And as one recent constitutional law expert from Georgetown said, this is one of the greatest constitutional scandals in United States history. You had a mentally incompetent president, most likely, who was actually not running the administration. Some other people who were not elected at all were running it. And we still don't really know who they are. So this is, a truly unusual chapter. By the way, let me remind you, Trump recently turned 79 years old, and he still seems very sharp despite all his oddities. So it's not so much about age as it is about a person's mental state. Many people say that Biden was too old, but he's not much older than Trump. I think it's all about mental state.
That's a good point. You look at Donald Trump, at his energy, he's sharp, he's aware of the details. There's no doubt about who's running the country. It's a completely different story when you look at Joe Biden. And this scandal with Vitoruchka, like you said, it's just unbelievable. It raises a lot of questions. The fact is, Vitoruchka was used to pardon Fauci and members of the Biden family. The White House is investigating this unbelievable situation.
It's slowly coming out that the Democrats deceived the country. They were obligated. Here's the 25th Amendment. It's not that amendment, but the 25th, about health in the Constitution, to replace the president with the vice president if he is incapacitated. But it was convenient for them to do whatever they wanted, forging Biden's signatures and not being held accountable for anything. On the last day in office, Avtopero signed, listen here, 2,490 pardons, which is practically impossible unless you're working with several devices in 3 shifts. There are rumors that several employees received huge bribes for these pardons. Even if it's just $50,000 per pardon, that's about $125 million for a day's work. And in total, they issued 8,000 such pardons. This is a record number of pardons signed by any president in the history of the United States of America. But what's especially impressive is that it all happened in just one day, on the very last day, literally in the final few hours of official Biden's, so to speak, leadership of the country. 2,490 pardons. A presidential candidate in the year 2028. Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has gotten into another scandal. He and his friends decided to make some money by building a high-speed train from Los Angeles to San Francisco. He was already doing it long before they came up with the idea.
Hearing about how wonderful the transportation system is, well, finally, California will do everything right with this new high-speed railroad.
So we're starting to build the best high-speed railroad in the world, but first we'll steal all the money.
A little train going from San Francisco to Los Angeles, operated by Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. Have you ever heard of Gavin Newsom? His train project is the worst cost overrun I've ever seen. It's utter lawlessness. Then they said, okay, we won't go into San Francisco, we'll stop 25 miles outside the city, and we won't go to Los Angeles, we'll stop 25 miles before it. Planes fly there for a fraction of the cost. Cars can travel on an uncrowded highway back and forth. They got involved in this project.
So there are a bunch of airports, big ones and smaller ones, and they're very cheap. Air travel, there are several highways, expressways, are high-speed roads, millions of cars, buses run. There is actually a train, but what we don't have is a high-speed rail, just a regular train, but no high-speed railway. Why isn't there one? Because all the money allocated for construction was spent. I'm not joking on creating the project map. Once again, I'm not joking. Several billion disappeared somewhere, and California is demanding more from Washington. But not only for that, but also for restoring the areas that burned down because the Democrats stole the money meant for preparing the reservoir in case of a fire.
So California Governor Gavin Newsom is pretty amusingly angry today after the Trump administration just announced that they are finally going to shut it down and disconnect it. Basically, it's one of the most blatant and ridiculous examples of corruption, waste, and just outright government incompetence in modern American history. Honestly, I think this story is an underrated scandal that will seriously affect Newsom's future presidential campaign in 2028. We're talking about the infamous high-speed rail project in California. This idea has been around for decades to build a high-speed train from San Giles to San Francisco. Those of you who've been subscribed to the channel for a long time know it's one of those random political topics. I feel a wild passion about it. I grew up in Los Angeles. I remember this story. So that no one feels old, although even I feel uneasy about it in 2022. But the vote for building this high-speed rail took place in 2008. When I was in kindergarten, they told us they would build this train. Construction started when I was in middle school. A decade has passed and almost nothing has been built. Basically, they built a couple of railroad tracks in the Central Valley, which people called the train to nowhere because it doesn't go anywhere.
They stole it and refused to return it. When you steal, it belongs to someone else, but when it's time to give it back, it's suddenly yours. It's all different. So they feel sorry for the money. That's why they're demanding to be given more. They consistently provided it, and any president, including Biden, would do the same in exchange for the usual kickback. All these stories don't add to the popularity of the Democratic Party. They have no ideas on how to make Americans' lives better or how to make them safer. They have idiotic, incomprehensible ideas about protecting illegal immigrants, taking money from Americans, and giving it to migrants. They have one scandal after another. Wherever you look, there's deceit and theft. They lie all the time, and it keeps coming out, like a loser liar, and they keep lying more and more to cover up their own lies, which come out again. The Democratic Party, at least half of it, is shocked by the other half's destructive ideas. One after another, communists and Islamists are popping up, all eager for power, promising war against the free market, bringing in illegal immigrants, fighting the federal government, and uncontrolled tax increases. As I already said, the Lord has clouded their minds, thank God. That's why I said half of them are idiots, or rather, I'd say the majority, let's say 80% are idiots. And the rest are scoundrels among them, maybe, as I already said, scoundrel idiots or idiot scoundrels. Well, let's not single them out into a separate category. It's time for Dim's party to step down and make way for a party about the free market, about capitalism, and against equalization. And the two parties will argue about how best to build and protect the very capitalism that brought us here. The fact that our country has become the richest, the freest, the most independent from the perspective of the country and the people who live in it, in the world. I can't say that the leaders of the Democratic Party have lost their minds or gone crazy, because that happened a long time ago. Just look at how a real strong and smart opponent, Trump, makes a laughingstock out of these brainless fools, how common sense drives long rusty nails into the lid of their toilet.
Welcome to HANNITY. Welcome to the Hannity Show. And tonight, the radical left is simply beside themselves with grief. Their rage is completely out of control. On the bright side, fortunately, they're no longer setting Teslas on fire or attacking car dealerships. But unfortunately, and this is where things get serious, they found a new target: federal immigration agencies. Attacks on nuclear power plants have surged by an alarming 830%. I wonder if this has anything to do with statements like these. Take a look for yourself.
If you have facilities where people are held indefinitely and there is no legal procedure to get in or out, that is traditionally called a concentration camp or an internment camp.
That is the arrest of illegal immigrants, especially those who have committed violent crimes, and their deportation from the United States back to their countries of residence. Their citizenship is a concentration camp.
and they want to ethnically cleanse this country.
So we are white. By the way, I'm not white. I'm olive-skinned, like Israelis, Bedouins, Kurds, and Druze. So as whites, we want to cleanse America of other skin colors, differences, religions, and sexual preferences. And it doesn't matter that there is absolutely no evidence for this, none at all. People listen to this and say, I'll throw stones at these fascists. Nothing will happen to me for it anyway. These fascists are terribly interesting, by the way. People set cars ablaze, hurl stones, shatter windows, and the authorities do nothing in response.
The legacy state-run MEDIAMOM. This is what the state media mafia has come to. They've completely lost their composure and gone crazy. See for yourself. So we have this whole argument. It will be right after this. But let's start with one of the reasons why the Democrats are so angry right now. President Trump has turned out to be, well, incredibly successful. Honestly, even more than I could have imagined. He's keeping his promises, and America's getting better. The Republican Party has even started working together, which is rare for them. Of course, sometimes there are minor internal squabbles. At the same time, the Democratic Party is just a disaster. We have the Marxist Mamdani, who would be an outright disaster for the most famous city in the world. He is not the only Marxist running for mayor of a major American city. This radical socialist senator is now also seeking to lead Minneapolis.
A survey of the population, which Kunipek has been conducting for many decades, showed that 72% of the population believes that the Democratic Party in Congress and the Senate is not doing what it should be doing. And only 19% believe that the Democrats are acting correctly and in the interests of the people. Well, it depends on who you consider to be the people, really. And what will happen if communists are elected as mayors in New York, Minneapolis, or somewhere else? But 19% of supporters is shocking from both sides. First, how little that is, right? And second, where did so many idiots come from? The answer will be simple, and you know it, from the camel. That's all for now. Until next time.